how and some differences in their campaign management tools. Even multi-channel, like how well does each platform stack up against the other when it's not emailing, right? That's the core of each of these platforms. But what about texting? What about voice messages? What about print pieces like postcards? What about sending gifts like stocks and automating that? We'll talk about that. And then scoring, automating that process. Quick little story. When I started out marketing 15 years ago at a company called USI that's now been bought by AT&T, I sat at Oracle Open World's trade show floor, which was my first huge event I ever went to. It was like 24, I think, 23. Anyway, we were giving away a Harley-Davidson beautiful motorcycle. And of course, we had a ton of people coming to our booth to fill out with paper and pen, because this was 15 years ago, a form that asked some questions basically for us to qualify them. We had stacks of papers. I kid you not, like a foot stack here, a foot stack there. My job as like the little lowest woman on the totem pole there was to go through those stacks. And how I scored them was, if I couldn't read it, and this was direction from our CMO, she's like, okay, here's how we're going to do this just as a first pass. If you can't read it, that's a D. Put it way over here in this pile. If you can kind of read it, but it's hard, make that a C. If you can read it and it's a couple of different criteria, like they're in North America or Europe, which is mainly where we have our clients and target people, put it in the B pile. And then if you can read it and it has that criteria and then a couple of other things, like their roles were IT, because we were selling into the IT area, then make it an A. That was scoring very manual, literally, paper and everything and paper cuts. Now we automate that, right? It's basically you identify the criteria in these platforms and you automate it. So we'll talk about that. And then the other category is a catch-all. That's where I see people get nickel and dimed and PO'd the most after they purchase one of these platforms. They usually get really angry when they've migrated, say, from, 10 years on Marketo to Eloqua, and it happens. It's actually, I will say, more common that, well, I'll get into it, and you'll gather your own inferences from some of these things. So let's dive into it. And again, if you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A section. All right, and then let's first talk about the history. Where did these platforms even come about and when? So in this format you see here, this table with the 4 columns for each of the platforms, that's how it's going to be throughout the rest of the presentation, just to keep it clean and easy to see them stacked up side by side, and the feature that we're talking about on the left-hand side. So Eloqua came about first in 1999, and then 7 years later, Marketo and HubSpot, and then a year after that, Pardot. So Eloqua had a little bit of a leg up. Well, of course you do when you come to market first. Now, these aren't the first ever marketing automation platforms. Aprimo was there before, Unica, but there wasn't necessarily a category called marketing automation. And actually, when Eloqua came out in 1999, it was created as a website chat tool. The name Eloqua came from, basically they were marketing as speak eloquently to your website visitors. So the internet basically busted in the late 90s, and that tool they had, there weren't a lot of people that needed it anymore. They shifted their model and basically started to create the category of marketing automation. So that's where that name Eloqua comes from. Eloqua. People say it differently. I had a boss that said it funky every time. Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot, Pardo, whatever you want to say. I call it Pardot because I speak American English, but I think my European counterparts say Pardo. However you'd like to say these things, let's keep going. So Eloqua has been acquired by Oracle, 2012 that happened. 6 years later, Adobe bought Marketo, and Salesforce bought Pardot, 2012. HubSpot has not been acquired. They're still their own entity. And from what I understand of their business model, I don't see that changing. We did expect that Marketo would get purchased after both Pardot and Eloqua got purchased. It was just a matter of time. So I thought it was going to be SAP, personally, because they had so many SAP leaders at Marketo at the time. But anyway, the fiscal year end is important for each of these organizations because that is typically when you'll get the best deal for the platform. However, each of them has their quarters throughout the year, and if you wait until the end of the quarter, you're also going to get a really good deal. You can still get a good deal the first month of a quarter. It's just like buying a car, though. If I buy a car at the beginning of a month versus the end, there's some room for negotiation. Is it going to save me thousands of dollars? No, for a car. unfortunately it's not. It's going to save me more. Like, okay, so I have a Toyota 4Runner. I love those. I'm probably going to get one again. I always wait or try to find out when the new Toyota 4Runner is coming out. And then that means the current year ones that are brand new are going to get discounted. So anyway, it's just one of those negotiation things to consider. Now, looking at the history, when ELQA came about in 99, ELQA really was geared towards enterprise organizations, meaning large companies. NetApp, McAfee, Dell, big companies really pushed the ELQA product and development team to make it work for their needs. High volumes of data, really funky use cases. That is part of how ELQA got the reputation that it was this huge, like the Porsche of all of these platforms with all the bells and whistles. Well, it's because that's what these large companies really pushed it to do. Not that SMB companies couldn't do that as well, but the volumes, the scalability is really the big thing that it had early on because of that being their focus. But Marketo and Pardot and HubSpot, specifically Pardot and HubSpot, saw the opportunity to focus on the smaller organizations. Marketo mainly focused on medium, some small, and everybody was doing really well. Well, 5 or so years ago, each of these vendors, especially once they got acquired, were now saying we're a good fit for everybody. And we have different versions, which are listed on the bottom there, and their names for each. But basically, they all try to sell into each of the markets. Does that mean they're all a great fit for every size organization? Potentially. However, if you're like a 5-person company, like a real estate agent, and you have a couple other realtors, probably not the best platform for your needs. There's smaller marketing automation platforms that are also cheaper, like Infusionsoft is one of them. I call those baby marketing automation or junior marketing automation. They're not meant for organizations, I would say, that have like at least 50 employees. And then another important factor with history here is, and also currently, what is their focus? Is it really meant for B2B marketing efforts or B2C? People argue it's not B2B or B2C. It's your business to people, to humans. Of course it is. We've always had that as the case. It's always a human reading the email or the text that we're trying to personalize our content for. However, there are strategies for how to do marketing when it's an organization with multiple people making a decision versus one consumer deciding to buy a pair of panties. Yes, I said panties. Hopefully that keeps your attention. So basically, today, if you look at the website that Oracle has with content about ELQA, that Adobe has for Marketo, that Pardot has, or Salesforce has for Pardot, they're explicitly calling these their B2B marketing automation platform. HubSpot doesn't designate it as B2B. They're really saying our HubSpot marketing platform is good for both. Can you use ELQA, Marketo, or Pardot if you have B2C marketing? Yes. And actually, some people have asked me, Karen, why aren't you including the other B2C platforms in this evaluation comparison? Well, for one, we only have so much time, and it would take more time to do that. But just to give you guys an idea, the equivalent at Oracle for B2C-focused marketing is called Responsive. They have ELQA for B2B. Adobe has Marketo for B2B. They have what's called Adobe Campaign for B2C. Salesforce has Exact Target that they purchased, which is their answer for B2C. And then they have Pardot for B2B. Now, I will say, and if you're a Salesforce salesperson, you might want to shoot me, but that's okay. This is the reality. Salesforce typically, a lot, most of the time, will sell Exact Target and Pardot if you're a B2B marketing organization, because there are limitations to Pardot, and then there are limitations to Exact Target. So oftentimes they couple them together to be competitive with HubSpot, Marketo, and ELQA. It's something to keep an eye out for, because you really are getting and maintaining 2 marketing automation platforms then, not one, if you get Pardot and Exact Target. And the Exact Target, they won't usually say that name. It's typically Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is confusing because usually when I think of a marketing cloud, I think of more than just marketing automation. I think of other platforms too. So let's move on. List pricing, I think just as an evaluator or somebody trying to gain intelligence on these platforms, I'd want to know where do they start. So if you go online, you can find their pricing, except for Adobe does not publish it for Marketo. What I will say is the old list pricing Marketo used to have on their website was right in between, closer to ELQA, but not too far off from Pardot. All this said, I've seen situations over the last 11 years I've been consulting where Pardot's more expensive than Eloqua, where Marketo is cheaper than Eloqua. It varies. It depends on your negotiating, how big of an organization you are, how much of an discount the rep can get for you, especially if it's towards the end of their quarter or fiscal year. There's a whole bunch of different factors. So take the list pricing with a grain of salt, especially with Pardot and HubSpot, because even though they look super cheap, like HubSpot at $50 a month per user, I think it is, not per user, $50 a month, that is very deceiving because that starter version of HubSpot marketing includes very little marketing automation, actually. So because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, I got to get through this a little quicker here. I'm going to use small, medium, and large to refer to the different versions of each of these platforms because they have different names, like it's Eloqua Basic, but it's Pardot Growth and HubSpot Starter and Marketo Select. We're going to just use small, medium, large to make it as close to an apples-to-apples comparison as possible. So let's dive in. Again, for anybody that joined late, if you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A. Okay, so getting data in the platform, getting data out, creating custom applications on top of these platforms. You don't hopefully want to do that or need to, but it does happen, and you need the APIs typically to do that. This is what we're going to talk about first. So just the number of apps that are pre-built and ready to use on the platform. Eloqua has their App Cloud, Marketo has LaunchPoint, Pardot has their App Exchange shared with Salesforce CRM, and HubSpot has their App Marketplace, also shared with their HubSpot CRM. So Eloqua has 145 apps. You can see the rest. Marketo 359, Pardot only with 47, HubSpot with 286. The APIs. So the REST API is good for when you want to build an application on top of Eloqua, Marketo, or Pardot, or HubSpot. It also can be used for data transfers. So you can see, if we just look across the rows there, Eloqua and HubSpot lead the way. They have the fastest, highest capacity REST API. And then Marketo and Pardot, it's a bit less, of course, actually 100,000 versus 500,000, 400,000 less daily API requests. Now, if we look at the bulk API, so typically the bulk API is used for transferring large volumes of data. It doesn't have to be large volumes. It could be 2 records getting passed to, say, Marketo from a non-standard CRM, but typically it's for higher volume exports and imports. So if we look at the daily export for the bulk API, Eloqua, it's unlimited. Marketo has a limit of 500 megabytes. Pardot and HubSpot, it's not published. What I will tell you guys is when something is not published, it's not a high limit. Unfortunately, it's so low that the vendor has decided not to publish it and make it public knowledge. So keep that in mind. Now, the bulk API daily import limit, Eloqua is 3 times higher than Marketo and Pardot at 32 megabytes, and then Marketo and Pardot at 10 each. HubSpot not published. We have used both the REST and bulk API for each of these platforms many times over the years. My colleagues, like the founders at Sojourn, have been doing this for 10 plus years each as well. And if you were to think of these APIs as like cars on a racetrack, Eloqua would zoom ahead of the others just with the speed and the capacity of their APIs. And then you'd have HubSpot with the REST API in second, but unfortunately it would be like the last in place for the bulk API. And then Marketo would be right up there trying to catch up to Eloqua, but still behind it with both APIs. And then third, Pardot. So it's like HubSpot would go fast with the REST API and then slow with the bulk API. It's important because even though you may not have a need to use the APIs, maybe you don't even know what an API is yet, no problem. I didn't know what it was until like 5 years ago or so. So anyway, the net of it is you want a platform that can scale, because at some point it is likely, if you keep one of these platforms for, say, more than 2 years, which hopefully is the case to get your ROI on it, you're going to need to tap into the APIs, even if you have a standard CRM integrated with one of these platforms like Salesforce.com, Microsoft Dynamics, etc. So again, any questions, please pop them into the Q&A. And then the SFTP import-export, so that's a flat file integration or like a CSV Excel file that you want to automate being loaded into or out of the platform. Eloqua is actually the only one that can work with an SFTP. site and automate that, the import into Eloqua, the export out of Eloqua to the SFTP server. SFTP stands for Secure File Transfer Protocol, blah, blah, blah. But it surprised me. I think it was 4 years ago when I found out Marketo couldn't do that. I actually pushed a couple people to find out for sure because I couldn't believe it. But it's not a super, like, it comes up for us with our clients that use these platforms. But that is, I think, is why it's not like more commonly people want to use the API because it's faster. Okay. So somebody did ask, does any of the sales deals, or are they based on the integration capabilities? Not the apps. So you do pay more. So for instance, let's say you wanted to buy Pardot, but you needed more than 100,000 REST API calls per day. You pay more to Salesforce to add that to Pardot. So they have the capacity to add more. Now, what I'm showing you here, this is where the platforms work best. If you try to use Pardot and do 500,000 REST API calls per day, it's going to go slow and some will fail. So that's just something to keep in mind. But they do let you pay them more to get more of most anything. It doesn't always mean it's going to work well. Flat file transfer. So somebody asked an example of a flat file transfer to Eloqua via SFTP. So I'll give you an example. Right now we have a client in the law firm space, legal world. They have a non-standard CRM. It's not one of the CRMs you see on the top row of the slide here. It's not Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle Sales Cloud. Basically, it doesn't just do a plug and play native integration, we call it, with any of the platforms. So what we're going to do, they've decided to go with Eloqua. They are going to use SFTP. The data getting to Eloqua and out of Eloqua back over to their CRM in their space, it's not as critical for it to be real time. So they're okay with waiting a day or up to as fast as a half an hour for the data to go back and forth. So in their case, it's going to be their client's information passing to Eloqua, and then Eloqua is going to send out, like, say, activities it's tracking, like that it sent people emails, the client's emails, that the person clicked through, visited their website, submitted a form. So that's a pretty common use case for using an SFTP integration. So let's talk about what's more common, though, is a native CRM integration. I say native, that means if you get Eloqua or Marketo or Pardot, and for instance, you have Salesforce.com CRM, still the most popular CRM in the world, it will already have pre-built APIs to connect Eloqua, Marketo, Pardot with Salesforce. So I want to point something out. If you're looking at Pardot or you have Pardot, this is super important. Salesforce announced not too long ago that starting February 15th of next year, just a nice little right after Valentine's gift, if you want to continue to use Pardot, you have to have a Salesforce CRM license. It's their way of making more money with the product they have. Salesforce CRM is where they make their money, not Pardot. Pardot is usually, in some cases, super cheap or given away in opportunities to get a client to renew their Salesforce CRM product. So basically, if you, like, let's say next year after February 15th, let's say you have Microsoft Dynamics as your CRM and you want to buy Pardot, they'll let you do it. You can't integrate Pardot with Dynamics. You would have to also get Salesforce CRM, at least one license. So it's a funky thing. Most of our clients who use Pardot have Salesforce CRM or they have no CRM, so it doesn't hurt them in this situation. So you can see there, Eloqua does out of the box integrate with Salesforce.com, Microsoft Dynamics, and of course Oracle Sales Cloud, since Oracle owns Eloqua. Marketo integrates with Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. And then you can see Pardot, like I said, just with Salesforce.com, and HubSpot as well, just with Salesforce.com. The next few categories, excuse me, I had to put myself on mute there, are pretty important if you're going to need to purchase one of these platforms and integrate it with Salesforce, Dynamics, or Oracle Sales Cloud. So the first thing is, where do you actually maintain the integration? And with Eloqua, it's in Eloqua, the marketing automation platform. With Marketo, Pardot, and HubSpot, most of the integration setup and maintenance is done in the CRM. It's subjective if you prefer one over the other. My experience has been that most of our clients prefer to maintain it in the marketing automation platform, there's a greater ability to more quickly make changes to the integration as you need to, and to monitor it for marketing to own that. Now, that's different in each organization. Sometimes IT owns it, or sales ops actually owns the maintenance of the integration. So in their case, owning it on the CRM side may be even easier. Does the marketing automation platform integrate with any CRM object? Eloqua is the only one that can do that. With Marketo, Pardot, or HubSpot, you'd have to do a custom webhook or API coding. The next feature, does the marketing automation platform integrate with more than one CRM? Eloqua is the only one that can do that. So with Marketo, Pardot, and HubSpot, you can have it only integrated with one CRM environment. That's it. So if you have, let's say, we're going to just do Salesforce.com. Let's pretend like that's our CRM. If I have Marketo and I want to integrate first with Salesforce CRM test environment, I have to buy a Marketo test environment to do that first. Marketo, even the Marketo's world is kind of odd, but you can't take your Marketo production or live environment and integrate it with anything but your CRM production environment. So we see our clients pay more and find out about that after the fact and get kind of frustrated, like, wait a minute, I thought we could do this. No, you can only integrate Marketo, Pardot, and HubSpot with one CRM environment. And somebody asked in this past webinar, well, can you integrate Eloqua with different CRMs? Yes, you can integrate Eloqua with a Salesforce CRM. You can integrate Eloqua with Dynamics and with Oracle Sales Cloud all at the same time, one Eloqua instance. Not exactly advisable, but it can technically be done, and it has been done. We've had some clients where they've had it integrated with up to like 4 different CRMs. The next feature, does the marketing automation platform send notifications to, or can you set it up to send notifications whenever the integration has an error? Eloqua is the only one that does that in their integration area. And then the last bit is, does the marketing automation platform allow for intentional duplicate leads to exist in CRM without having to do custom coding like API coding to work with that setup from the CRM side? Eloqua and Pardot can do that. Marketo and HubSpot, no. So I have to keep moving here. I'd love to give you more use cases on each of these things. But in a nutshell, the CRM integration, let me just go back there quick. This is definitely a category where Eloqua excels beyond the others. You're not going to see that same situation across these other categories. Eloqua is not going to be like the clear winner, but it is in that category. So data management and retention, each of these different platforms has their own name for their main part of their database. Eloqua has contacts, Marketo has persons, Pardot has prospects, and HubSpot has contacts. They each have a maximum number of fields, 250 in Eloqua, unlimited in Pardot, and Marketo, 1,000 in HubSpot. You have to be careful in Eloqua to not, try to add too many fields because of that limitation. But then with Marketo and Pardot, you can have too many fields, and then we see clients and those have duplicate fields because they have so many fields that they can just create willy-nilly. So you really got to have governance in place, processes with Marketo and Pardot with maintaining your database, keeping it as clean as possible when it comes to creation of new fields, maintaining them. Now, data retention, this is super important. So Pardot and HubSpot don't publish it, unfortunately. If you go on their platforms, they do allow you to go back more than 25 months to say, filter to find people that clicked through an email more than 25 months ago. Now, they don't keep the data forever. So, for example, Eloqua retains activity data for 25 months. What are activities? It's things like that you sent somebody an email, that they opened it, clicked through it, visited your website, visited a marketing automation platform, hosted landing page, submitted a form, that the record was created in CRM or updated by the marketing automation platform. So, Marketo has a funky caveat here. So Marketo keeps most activities for 25 months, just like Eloqua. However, they have a list of about 10 different high-volume activities, as they call them, that they only store in Marketo for 90 days. This is not a good thing. It's things like website visits, email sends and delivered. So if I want to query in Marketo or make a filter on a smart list to show me the people that visited our website that we're tracking with Marketo Munchkin code 6 months ago, you cannot do it. There is a workaround to basically take that old data and then load it into a Marketo custom object, but then you have to keep in mind Marketo custom objects have limitations and you have to pay more to increase that limitation. So not a good thing. That's definitely a ding for Marketo, unfortunately. And that's not always been the case. They were 25 months for everything, just like Eloqua, for a long time, until I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago they made this change. Database partitions, all of them can do it. With Eloqua and Marketo, their medium and large versions include the ability to partition the databases. They call it different things. Marketo calls it database partitioning. Eloqua calls it contact level security with labels. Pardot and HubSpot, you can do it, but you have to buy their most expensive version. You're going to start to see a trend throughout the rest of this presentation with Pardot and HubSpot, where to get what you could get with the medium version of Eloqua Marketo, you have to get the most expensive version of Pardot and HubSpot. So field change tracking is not a super critical feature for most marketers using these platforms, but basically what it is if you have a field that you want to have the ability to know whenever it changes and see the change in the field, like lead score, maybe that their title has changed. With Eloqua, you can only do this for 10 fields, contact fields, and it will keep the data of, let's say, the lead score changing for an unlimited amount of time. Cool. Okay. Marketo, it's cool, but it's flip-flopped. They will let you track as many fields as you want, but it only stores that data for those fields for 90 days. Same thing with Pardot, except for it's 30 days. And then last but not least, this is probably, I think, one of the most critical things people overlook with these platforms, the data management tools in them. So all of them except for HubSpot have data management tools, things like deduplicating records, matching up records, cleaning up the data on the contact or the person or the prospect in the database, standardizing things like industry values, state, country, job role, job level. Eloqua has the most capabilities here. Marketo has automation rules. Pardot has automation rules. So Eloqua does win that feature. Marketo comes in third. Pardot, I will say, has the best deduplication / merging capability. It mirrors Salesforce CRM. It's my favorite to use. Eloqua, it's a bit clunky. Can it do it? Yes, but it's clunky. Marketo can't do that. So Marketo, you end up having duplicates, which you have to, again, have governance to maintain. Or as we see with our Marketo clients that don't keep up with that, a cleanup effort, typically around renewal with Adobe, or they'll have to pay more. So custom objects, our third category here, are a way to add more data to the marketing automation platform. An example would be you want to capture survey responses. Whenever somebody fills out a survey response, if let's say they fill out 3 surveys this year, we don't want to just have the last survey's answers stored in the marketing automation platform. We want to be able to see all 3 survey responses, the answers on all 3 of them, and be able to segment off that data, score off of it, personalize the kind of 3 big use cases for these platforms, and just analyze it. So custom objects allow you to store those 3 records and tie them to the master record in the platform, like an Eloqua, the contact, Marketo, the person, Pardot, the prospect, HubSpot, the contact. So we call that a one-to-many relationship. It's one person that has done multiple things you're tying to their one record. HubSpot does not have custom objects. Some people call them custom data objects, CDOs, same thing I'm talking about here. HubSpot doesn't have them. HubSpot has what's called custom properties. It's like a half-baked custom object in their world. So their user community is begging them to create true custom object functionality that works similar to these other platforms. It's not there yet. Pardot has a big caveat here too. With Pardot, the only way you can create a custom object in Pardot is to push it from Salesforce first. And in Salesforce, that custom object has to be tied to leads, contacts, or accounts. So in Pardot, let's say that you wanted to have a custom object for survey responses. You first have to create it in Salesforce CRM first, and then using the integration and create that custom object in Pardot to capture those survey responses. That is not ideal because there are oftentimes marketing pieces of data that we don't need to pass the CRM. We don't need to actually use up our bandwidth in the CRM to hold that data. So Marketo and Eloqua definitely have the most flexibility here. So just the number, let's go through some of the limitations. The maximum number of custom objects in each platform you can read across there. Eloqua, Marketo are close. However, Eloqua has the highest capacity here. With its medium and large version, you can have as many custom objects as you want. With Marketo, this is where I see people buy it and then get pissed after the fact. They find out they have the medium version of Marketo, which only comes typically, unless you customize it when you purchase it, with 5 custom objects. So maybe you use one for surveys, you use one for event registrants and attendance, you use the 3rd one for webinar events and attendance, you use the 4th one for purchases, and you use the 5th one for something else, maybe to be determined down the road. If you want to buy, or if you want to use more, you have to pay more. And I think they usually sell them in chunks of 5. So Pardot is even lower. With Pardot's large version, you get 4 of these, and then you pay for more after that. And you have to be careful because, like with Pardot, let's say you wanted to have 20 custom objects, you're starting to push the limits of Pardot's capabilities, and you start to see the platform slow down. So, and the next thing is very important too. What's the maximum number of records you can store in those custom objects? So let's say we have 5 custom objects in ELQ that we're using. We can have 25 million records across those 5 objects. So with Marketo, it's a much smaller limitation. It's 1 million. And then with Pardot, it's 800,000. So this is, again, another area where I've seen people purchase Pardot or Marketo, and they find out, wait a minute, we can only have 1 million records. And if they're a pretty high volume organization that wants to store a lot of data in these custom objects, they will gladly sell you more. Adobe will sell you more. Salesforce will sell you more. But you're going to start to see the platform slow down, especially in the custom object area of Marketo and Pardot. They're just not built to handle that scale like ELQ is in this category of custom objects. And then you have the maximum fields per custom object. There's nothing huge here. Pardot, it's probably around 50. They don't publish it for whatever reason. Marketo, it's 97. ELQ, it's 250. Nothing good or bad there. ELQ used to be 50, then they jumped it up to 250. Most people don't need more than 50 per custom object for the fields. I don't know where Marketo came up with 97, but it's 97. And the next thing is, where do you actually see the custom objects in the marketing automation platform, and what can you do with them when you see them? ELQ, you can view the custom object, you can create it from scratch right in ELQ, you can edit it, you can delete it, like add fields, remove fields, change the field type, see the records, do all that. You can also do that via file upload or the API. Marketo is close. However, with Marketo, you can't create, edit, delete the custom object in the platform. You have to use a file upload or the API to do so. So it's less accessible at the user level. Pardot, even less accessible at the user level. You can only view the custom objects in Pardot. And then if you want to delete any of them or revise them, you have to do it in Salesforce first. The next feature is the ability to create or edit custom object records via a form. ELQ, you can do that. The other platforms you can't, surprisingly. And then the last thing is, can you use that data in the custom objects for personalization? ELQ, yes. Marketo, yes. Pardot, no. So I got to keep going here because we're like not a ton of time left, but a lot to get through for you guys. So, and I want to have time for questions. So campaign management, I'm going to do in 2 categories. First, this slide is about the basics, and then the next is going to be about multi-channel marketing. So can you actually create a campaign, an engagement studio, a program with drag and drop features? In ELQ, you can with their campaign canvas, it's called. Marketo's programs and smart campaigns, you can do a single workflow with basic conditions. It's not as elaborate as ELQ's campaign canvas yet. I think it's going to get there. Pardot, HubSpot, no, they don't have this capability. Can you start the campaign, stop it, edit it, and then restart it? All the platforms you can now do this. This was something that only a few could do, and then the other 2 added over the years. So now everybody allows you to do that. The next capability, can you clone a campaign with all of the assets that are in that campaign at the same time? Meaning, I copy the campaign structure, and if the campaign has 3 emails in it, it also makes a copy of all 3 emails as well at the same time with a click of one button. Marketo and HubSpot have that. Pardot and ELQ do not. And then what's the maximum number of active campaigns you can have in the platform? Marketo and ELQ, it's unlimited. Pardot and HubSpot, it depends on your version. It ranges. With the small version of Pardot, it's 20. The most expensive version of Pardot, it's 200 engagement studios. And then with HubSpot, the smallest version, 0. Again, this is where I'm like, If you want marketing automation, you wouldn't ever get HubSpot's cheapest version, but we rarely ever see that anyway with customers. And then their most expensive or large version is 1,000 workflows, as they call them. Email send time optimization, Eloqua can do it. It is in closed, what's it called? Actually, I think it is generally available now. Marketo doesn't have send time optimization yet. You have to use an app to do so. Pardot does with their Einstein product add-on, so it costs more. And HubSpot does have this capability. Send time optimization, for anybody that doesn't know, means the email gets sent out of the platform, but when it gets sent, it's going to actually deliver it to me when it shows by the intelligence in the platform that I am most likely to open that email. It's looking at my open history to determine that. It'll send to somebody else on that same campaign being sent that email, hopefully the same step. It's going to look at their best time that they open emails. So for me, it's at 7 a.m. on Fridays. That's when I'll receive it. It's when it'll get delivered. Or let's say Moni, if it's on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time, that's when she'll receive it. And then email A/B testing, Eloqua, Marketo have done a nice job to make this nice out-of-the-box feature. Pardot and HubSpot, you have to buy their medium and large versions to get it. Multi-channel marketing, so all the platforms have native email marketing capabilities. Cool. That's like been their bread and butter for a long time, and what is still the number one feature we see clients in most industry use more than anything. SMS is coming up strong though. So landing pages, all of them have the capability to build a page that will go live to the internet, or a landing page in the platform. However, with Pardot HubSpot, you have to get their medium and large versions. It doesn't come with small, that capability. Native SMS or texting, Eloqua, it's not native. You have to use a paid app. Marketo has their Vibes product that you can use. It is an additional cost to use it. Pardot, HubSpot, like Eloqua, you also have to pay to use an app on top of these platforms to do text messaging and voice messaging. Native print, like a postcard being automatically sent at a certain point in an engagement studio or a campaign or program, all of them, you have to use the paid app, like a PFL, for example. Website chat, an example of that is like Drift. The only platform that has their version of a chat tool like Drift is HubSpot, but it is an additional cost. The others, you have to use something like Drift and then integrate with the platform. And basically, like, you can push the chat data that you want into the marketing automation platform and use, say, for segmentation and follow up. Social, Eloqua doesn't have a social management platform or add-ons. You use apps for that, like Hootsuite, Octopus, those are some good ones. Marketo has some capabilities here. It doesn't replace or come close to the capabilities of a Hootsuite or an Octopus. Those are true social marketing management platforms, like listening and publishing and math and reporting on those things. Pardot and HubSpot, you can use their social tools like Marketo's, but you have to get the more expensive versions. So what I will say with social is I wouldn't buy the Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot social tools. I would, if you have the money, get something like Hootsuite or Octopus, which typically integrates with most of these platforms. That's a better way to do social marketing management. And then a marketing calendar, Eloqua doesn't have this. They had a half-baked version of it, but that no longer exists. Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot do, which is great. It's not on the roadmap for Eloqua. I would hope at some point they would add it. Scoring, so in a nutshell here, let's just go through it. Multiple scoring engines live at the same time. All these platforms can now do this. This was something they could not all do. Now they all can. So there's no limitation with Eloqua's medium and large version. You can have as many scoring engines live at the same time as you want. Same thing with Marketo. With Pardot and HubSpot, you can see there are limitations there. 50 with Pardot's large version, 25 with HubSpot's large version. Still plenty. Can you have multiple scores viewable in each of their versions of a sales tool, like Eloqua Profiler, Marketo Sales Insight? Eloqua is the only one that you can actually do that. I will tell you that's not like a make or break feature with any client I've ever seen. I've actually thought about removing that feature, but some people still ask about it because it relates to scoring. Does the marketing automation platform automatically degrade the score? So if somebody becomes inactive, we don't want them still scored as a hot lead. Yeah, Eloqua is the only one that systematically takes care of that for you. As a user, you don't have to set it up because it resets the scores daily. Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot, you can still do it, but you have to set up the platform to do it. It's just one extra step in the setup. Account scoring. So Pardot, you can't do it. Eloqua and Marketo, you can do it using their account fields to score off of, or a paid app like demand-based, Triblio. And then HubSpot does have a reporting add-on product where you can do this. Basically, the reporting is to give you the access to see the account scores. And then predictive scoring, Pardot with their Einstein feature and HubSpot with their own AI-related feature allow you to do predictive scoring. With Eloqua and Marketo, you have to use a paid app to do that. It's not native in the platforms yet. It is on their roadmaps. No idea when that'll come to reality, though. The last category here. So again, this is where I see people get nickel and dimed the most. I've really tried to call that out on the other side too, where I see it happen. So when you get the medium version of these platforms, the marketing users that you get, these are people that can log in and create campaigns, upload lists, create forms, create emails, etc. Eloqua comes with 50. Marketo only comes with 10. People get very surprised once they buy Marketo and find that out, and they have 15 people that need to access Marketo. And really, actually, all 15 do, because sometimes we'll challenge those clients and say, well, wait, do all 15 people actually need access to Marketo? And of course, if they do, they got to buy more now from Adobe to get those additional 5. Pardot and HubSpot, you can have as many users as you want. Their model, all these platforms, where they make their money and charge you when they give you their estimated cost or proposal is based on your number of contacts that have email addresses. So anyway, that's part of the algorithm for them. These other things here are just ways they can, well, nickel and dime you. And it's also a way for them to make a difference between their different versions of their platform, so it's clear. So the number of reporting users in the platforms, the medium version, again, Eloqua, it's 50, Marketo, it's 10, Pardot, it's only 5, and HubSpot, it's unlimited. HubSpot definitely wins on the user front. They give you lots of access. And then which of these platforms actually has a business intelligence tool available for reporting? Eloqua has it. It's included. It's called Insight, so it's not an additional cost. Marketo has Visible, which is freaking awesome for marketing attribution reporting as well. It's an additional cost. Pardot doesn't have this, or HubSpot doesn't have it either. They use their own pre-built reporting engine, which this is subjective, whether you like that or not. But the power of a business intelligence tool versus like a canned reporting engine is you typically can do more customized reporting, create more custom reports and dashboards. You get more flexibility with reporting in general there. And then the ability to create secure landing pages, make your images you upload into the platform secure in the links. All the platforms can do it. The only caveat is HubSpot. You have to get their medium or large version to do it. And then HIPAA compliant. If you're not in the healthcare space, you don't care about this, but Eloqua is the one that will give you the ability to use their secure messaging tool to send out emails that have HIPAA-related content in them. Basically, somebody has to log in to view the email content, just like you would like with your mortgage you're trying to apply for. You don't send your like personal salary information and tax records over your Gmail account. Hopefully, you don't work with a mortgage lender that asks you to do that. It's not good. People can receive it or get it and then hack it and, well, like steal your identity and such. And then does the marketing automation platform have the ability to have a sandbox and connect it to the production or live version of the marketing automation platform? Marketo and Eloqua, yes. HubSpot, Pardot, no, unfortunately. So I've gone through a lot of stuff. I just want to leave you with this tip, and then we're going to open it up for the questions. It is so important, of course, to evaluate the product features that I've gone through to help you solve challenges or help your clients solve their challenges and hopefully achieve their goals or exceed them. But it doesn't help if you don't have a strong implementation to get those features set up properly. And that's one piece of the puzzle. The other thing is having processes and governance for using those features. Like, cool, I can create as many fields as I want to in Marketo and Pardot and HubSpot, but what is our rule for not creating 5 different industry fields, for example? So we want to make sure that you have a really good implementation. So I always recommend you shop for the best platform and team to help you implement it, whether that's Oracle Consulting, Adobe Consulting, Salesforce Consulting, HubSpot Consulting, Sojourn Consulting, whoever. And I'm happy to give you recommendations. Like, for instance, we don't do HubSpot Consulting. I'm happy to give you recommendations for those that do. Or if you're in a space and we're not the best fit for, say, your Marketo implementation, I know other great partners like us that are good for that, like LeadMD, just as an example. So I'm going to go to the questions. Just as a reminder, this is a webinar that I don't think I even said this earlier. So here's your reminder. We do this webinar every month, third Wednesday of every month, same time, 11 Eastern. So you're welcome to join again or tell anybody else to join if you'd like. I have a question in here about, I am sure the competition must also speak or lay minds about Oracle Eloqua. What do you do in those situations? Raleigh, I'm going to say let's take that offline because